Righto, Carlos. What's your big? Where did you lose $1 million?
Well, it's funny because as a QS, you spend most of your time mopping up engineers' mistakes rather than creating your own. I dug pretty deep.
There you go.
And I managed to recall one career mistake, which I thought I'd share.
I thought you were going to recall that one time you went on site.
Yeah. Oh.
Cool. Welcome back to episode 100 of the Offsite podcast. Carlos, congratulations, mate. We made it. No one said we would. Originally, it was going to be, can we make it to like 5 episodes? Can we make it to 25 episodes? We're here, 100 episodes. Welcome back, mate.
Thank you very much. Yeah, someone said we'll never make it past 30. That's the marker of no one
I'm
ever
pretty sure that was the
after
producer.
30. Was it? Ollie? Yeah, okay. Well, we've blown that out the water. We've got to triple digits. So, no, well done, mate.
Yeah, thank you. So I think we were reflecting a lot on like the learnings from doing 100 of these discussions and thinking a lot about what does the next like 100 maybe or whatever look like. What are the things that we've learned and want to take forward? I think the things like we were talking about this at length over the last few weeks. It feels like the best episodes and the best topics are the ones that we have kind of a deep understanding or position on because of maybe what we do as a day job at Aphex. And when we hit those topics, we often find that we like want to take up more and more and more time and felt like a little bit constrained in the format before. So we want to try something different for the 100th episode. We wanted to do a totally different approach. So want to thank everyone that has listened along the way and would welcome people's feedback on a new, slightly different format. So what is the format? We're going to go for a slightly longer episode or time. We're going to introduce new voices to discuss a smaller number of topics and topics even closer connected to project delivery and actually running and trying to coordinate construction projects. So yeah, thank you for all the people that have given us feedback, that have that listen to the podcast, that engage with the stuff that we discuss, and yeah, we're keen for people's feedback as we experiment with a slightly different format. So for that format, it's going to be an all-in discussion, and for the 100th episode, we thought who better to get than a collection of the team here at Aphex. Every one of them from a construction background. So let's run through the roster for today's episode. So in addition to myself and Carlos, we have Kelvin. Kelvin had at least 10 years in infrastructure construction, pretty much all of it, Kel, I think, in Australia. I'd say, Kelvin, your background feels like similar to mine, the School of like Australian infrastructure engineer construction background, but probably you've got the unique advantage of actually delivering some projects on time and on budget. So, Kelvin, thanks.
Don't believe it.
Kel, thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. I think that means you're going to me first for the story, eh?
No. In addition, we have Thomas Schulz. Thomas is relatively new in his second month here at Aphex. Similarly, Thomas you'll pick up an Australian accent, has a background in major metro tunneling and tunneling projects across Australia and the UK. So this experience across multiple jurisdictions. And importantly, to balance out the engineering and commercial divide here, Thomas started life as an engineer and a project manager, and in recent times moved over to the dark side of commercial and quantity surveying. So Thomas, you'll be the casting vote on a lot of the debates because you've got the broadest background. You sit in most camps.
Cheers, mate. Yeah, you're going to make me play favorites here, aren't you, between the two of you? It's like fighting between mum and dad.
And then finally, we have Cam Rainger. Cam mate, you must have at least 8 years of construction experience, similarly across the UK and New Zealand. You've worked on building jobs, infrastructure jobs, rail jobs, and probably in addition to that background, bring the unique perspective of being able to keep us up to date on the latest All Blacks roster changes because of your New Zealand background. Welcome, Cam.
Thanks for having me, guys. Yeah, the All Blacks aren't looking so pretty this year, but that's all right.
That's good. I would have known that unless you told me. So that's you're already contributing. Okay, so we thought about what's the topic that we want to cover for the 100th episode. When we were talking internally, we kept coming up with this same common thought, which is that everyone on major construction projects knows that stuff basically goes wrong every day. You get conditioned to turn up and know that you're going to be presented with a whole bunch of unforeseen problems, and your job is effectively to fight through those problems to keep the project as on schedule as possible. And that you learn to do that through, good coordination, building good teams and relationships, great communication, and I guess from an Aphex perspective, good planning and having a good cadence around how you do that. But that's another podcast. So much of the advice and the discussion that we would see online, whether it's on the LinkedIn sphere or on podcasts, does make it feel like there's a bunch of these project management experts or linked influencers who feel like they've got all of the answers, maybe positioned like they've never made a mistake on a construction project in their life. And if they were to turn up on your project today, it would run perfectly smoothly with no issues. And I think everyone knows it's total bullshit. And so we thought for the 100th episode that we were going to flip the script and just talk openly about our personal stuff-ups, screw-ups, and things that we've gotten wrong and learned from on projects. Because I think one thing I was taught early on is you learn the most from mistakes and from projects that go poorly compared to ones that go well. So that's the framing for the episode today. And now we can probably see why we brought so many of the team members in to minimize Carlos and my reputational risk of. Because if we just have an episode where I list 5 of my many hundreds of stuff ups, it's not going to turn out to be the best thing for me. So yeah, I guess. Well, I feel like I've talked at length and set up some framing. So should we just dive in? Who's brave enough to talk about a stuff up, or if I was to use the word for Olu, to bleep out a fuck up first?
I've got one I can jump in on.
Good on you, Cam. You get
Here we go.
You get most respect for diving in first. Well done.
Got to get it done.
Are you the reason Crossrail was late? Is that what you're going to say?
Nah, that was your problem, mate. Only commercial issues. That was the issue there. So this is a story from a while back. But essentially, when I first started out, we were working on a retirement village. Essentially, we built an L shape and added another wing and a couple of other buildings over time. I was working on the structure of the new L-shaped wing. Wasn't big structure by infrastructure standards, but perhaps 50 meters wide by 250 meters long. I was very green at the time, and fortunately I had a legend of a structures/work managers working with me, a big old raro fellow called Johnny. One of these guys who's been in the industry for ages and can do a quick sketch to show you how we needed to build things right there in front of you. We were pouring the first half of the ground floor slab. It was ribbon infill with beams running through the middle and perpendicular to one another. Before we poured, as you do, we released some sections of the formwork to wash out the ties and the rust stains from the rebar. We had a new labour company working with us, and there was an older gentleman who loved to talk. Told me all about how much experience he had, what he had worked on, and how he used to run bigger gangs, so on and so forth. He was in charge of the teams reinstating that formwork before the pour. Pour day comes around. We have a couple of directors on site to view progress, catch up, and everything else. I was standing behind the group as we walked around the site, answering questions if they had any of me, but largely sweating that they didn't notice anything was wrong. Following the site walk, when I was feeling pretty stoked that the directors seemed happy, Johnny comes up to me and explains that a section of the formwork wasn't fixed properly and had blown. My heart obviously drops. He then goes on to say that he noticed this whilst I was with the directors and had kept it quiet until they had left site. He and the team were boxed off the section, and the boys were already on cleaning up the fugue cube that had splattered all over the basement. That definitely taught me a couple of things. One, if they're older than you and they talk a lot, doesn't mean they necessarily know what they are doing, and may just be hiding behind their words. Two, that's the boys on site always look after each other.
Nice work. Well prepped as well, Cam. Yeah, I was immediately, as you were going through, thinking about a whole bunch of faces popping into my head from projects where they'll tell you how they're the expert at some topic, and then you end up learning that you're learning to be careful what you trust and listen to. So yeah, they loosened off the formwork and not tightened it back up, and then basically the form busted.
Completely blew, and this happened when my directors were on site. And fortunately, like Johnny was an absolute legend. I've got so much respect for the guy. Yeah, he completely hit it from the directors and was already on cleanup by the time he told me. But yeah, that was definitely one of those moments. It's like, yeah, you can't really trust anybody. And I feel like everyone knows that person, as you said, that face pops up into their head, who does a lot of talking and may not be the best at their job.
I was going to say, the thing that I was thinking about while you were telling the story was the whole sort of trust element. And like, if you don't trust the loudest person in the room because of, as you described, the loudest person could just be all sort of talk. And then the other people are the quietest people in the room that might not be vocal. Do you end up just being like running around like a madman, double, triple, checking everything yourself because you don't really trust anyone, and then it becomes super inefficient?
I think certainly starting out for sure, but like it definitely kind of, you lose your faith in humans a little bit with just being let down multiple times with people saying they've done something and it's not done correctly, or they've kind of done a bit of a bodge job so they could, early knock on a Friday or something similar like that. So yeah, it's definitely a lot of double checking other people's work, but I feel like that's all part of the role as well.
It does feel like it reminded me of like a lesson from a construction manager that I worked with really early on, who was like, I don't want to hear your problem. I want to hear like the solution that you've got as well. And it feels like Johnny probably nailed that.
Absolutely.
Who signed off the pre-pour, Cam?
What was that, sorry?
Who signed off the pre-pour?
No comment. I mean, that was like I said, I was very green. It was like the first structure I actually probably worked on. But yeah, fortunately it was only like 200 mil thick, the slab, and I think the beams were only 800 mil, so we can kind of box it off relatively efficiently. But yeah.
So on all future pours, were you doing that like triple checking of all the form ties and everything before?
100%. Swinging on the formwork to make sure it was actually fixed properly.
That also doesn't feel like if we were on the scale. It's making me recalibrate my stuff up story because that doesn't reflect too poorly on you, Cam.
Wow. Yeah, it was lessons learned, wasn't it? As someone touched on, I did sign off the pre-pour, so I think in theory it was my name on the piece of paper.
Yeah, I think
I'm looking forward to Jason's story where he really fucked up a job.
But I'm just gonna have to recalibrate because I've got about 10 blow and formwork stories, so I can tick those off. I don't need to cover that. But yeah, it's like it does also feel like this common pattern in projects where like even after you check stuff properly, stuff can still definitely go sideways.
And I'd imagine until you really do it yourself, you don't really appreciate the scale and the problem itself, to then in the future know that the double triple tech is a good use of time and not something that someone told you might be bad if you don't.
100%, just checking on people's work. But I suppose it comes with just a little bit of experience as well, like actually knowing what good looks like.
It's also this like interesting thing that you kind of have to find out through some trial and error in projects where like how far you can kind of what the limits are. Like you've got all these things that you've got to check on a pre-pour, all these other issues you've got to check, and you don't know. I guess you don't always know first principles why you have to check some of the things. There's usually some judgment. You might be like, there's a lot of things have a little bit of gray area or a thoroughness of how deeply you inspect the thing. And sometimes you have to like find out a little bit the hard way.
Absolutely. As long as you've got a good team behind you, though, you can generally get away with it. Hopefully, wash over it relatively easy. But yeah, sometimes, I think the best lessons are sometimes going to be learned the hard way.
So no issues, no formal warnings, Cam. You still had a job the next day.
Fortunately, I think I was still there for another few years, to be fair. So yeah, I was still good.
Okay, right. I'm going to recalibrate my stories.
I was going to say, Jace, how many times have you been fired then?
Luckily, zero.
Formal warnings.
Warnings.
Like one of those superhero stories where it's like the origination story of Aphex.
Super villain. Cool. Thomas, do you want to go next, mate?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. So mine is sort of that lessons learned classic kind of, it's a mistake that probably covers so much. And I think every engineer has probably made it. And that's that old, if it's not in writing, it doesn't count. I was thinking about this and it's like one of the last mistakes before I left Oz was 100% the same thing. I didn't get something in writing, to set the scene. And I learned this as an undergraduate, a graduate site engineer. For some reason, it's one of those ones you keep having to relearn. And, set the scene. It was around QA, and it was around a temporary structure, temporary QA items like rock bolts, and got confirmation, getting the work pack signed off that, I don't know, you can use the production bolts to do your testing on. That's fine. Don't worry about it. Sure enough, do the production, yada, yada, yada. QAT comes around. Where's the initial pre-test results and all this kind of stuff for your QA? And they go, oh, such and such said, didn't need it. We could just use the production given that's such low risk item, that kind of stuff. And then sure enough, oh, I never said that. And all of a sudden, it's probably just didn't remember the conversation, didn't remember the context of it, didn't remember the conversation. And all of a sudden, it's, well, Thomas, you got to go do NCRs, you got to do the recovery, you got to go do all that other kind of stuff. You've got to go test every single bolt now to prove that they're all satisfactory. So, there is that impact. And it's just that classic, if it's not in writing, it doesn't count. And I've been caught out with interface contractors before. I've been caught out with, supervisors before, but it's just that classic lessons learned of that mistake.
Yeah. Do you think it's like, I immediately had the, again, flashbacks to so many scenarios, and I'm imagining other people did as well. Do you think it's like a culture thing? Or do you think people would do that kind of thing on purpose, or they genuinely forget? Or
I think in this case, it was a genuine, forget the conversation. Dude was super busy. I appreciate that, where he's at, huge things going on in his mind, probably doesn't really remember the conversation. And it's sort of it's done now, just do the NCR, move on kind of thing. I definitely know that experience though, where you try to put something in an email and you just get zero response despite the fact that they've verbally said it. So I think there is that double side to that story where you do get the people who are not willing to put things in writing.
So so if you were to do it differently again now, you'd send the email or raise the RFI?
Yeah, no, I'd probably just get it written at the point where we're having that conversation, because we're going through, the work pack, the detail of what was the QA regime and that kind of stuff. So I'd get him to write a physical note on there saying it. That would probably be, well, physical note, sign it off, happy days, you've resolved that issue just there and there. Whereas, yeah, definitely some people, they do have that hesitation of putting things in writing, which is always interesting.
Did you ever feel weird about asking for it in writing? I remember I used to struggle sometimes with that as a junior engineer, where I felt like I was, I don't know, being like a quasi lawyer or something, asking for it in writing.
I think after you've been burnt a few times, you no longer feel that hesitation about asking for things in writing. I think it's because in this regard, there was a good nature, the relationship there, good level of trust, all that kind of stuff. That, yeah, I didn't expect to have the need to put it in writing, but it's just that thing that, yeah, occasionally you still need to learn, because people do change their opinions and change their understanding of a situation.
Kel, you probably had a bunch of these, right?
I was trying to think, Thomas, was this the days when you had to pull test in the crowd? You had to do it yourself, as opposed to just the bolts on the side of the wall, like the dummy bolt?
100% that exact scenario. Dummy bolts.
You had the easy job anyway. At least you don't have to do it overhead anymore.
No, I've done the overheads, but yeah, no, this was in the crown, but it was horizontal bolts, not overhead bolts. But yeah, it's just one of those ones that, all of a sudden you're going through that paperwork of the NCR, chews up so much time going through that process. It's just a pain in the ass.
The classic temporary /temporary permanent thing is a big gray area to get caught out on as well. When you were talking, it was reminding me of this would have been one of my stuff up stories. I was working on a marine facility. We had to build a ramp for barges to berth on an island. And in order to get a bunch of equipment onto this island to build an LNG facility. And before we could build the permanent structures like a wharf and ferry terminal and stuff, we built this early rudimentary ramp, which we had to build by just dumping material off the side of a barge into the water until it came out of the water. And, it's just a rock ramp. And a lot of the conversation, so I was a very junior graduate engineer, months out of university. And all the conversation around this ramp was the kind of it was a temporary structure. It was something that we just needed to build in order to get on to build the actual structures. And then somehow that conversation, which was how we talked about this thing, we started slipping later and later on the schedule, because the amount of material it needed as we were putting material into the water would start compressing down on the surface of underneath the water. And so we'd go and put a barge load in overnight, and then realize we'd not made any progress when we were surveying the seabed. And so there was this time pressure, because it was taking a lot more material and a lot longer than expected. And there's all this conversation like, how can a temporary structure or something that we're just chucking the water take so long? How can we get the time so wrong? And I kind of just observed that conversation led to, I don't know, a feeling about the specifications of the structure being like what you would do if you were building like a haul road on a project temporarily. And yeah, one thing led to another, that we finished this thing and it was roughly to the dimensions of the drawings, but not exactly to the dimensions of the drawing.
Roughly.
Yeah, well, because I guess what was not intended to be, I don't think anyone in the management team intended the message to be, don't meet the specifications. But the way that the conversation led, I observed how the team kind of interpreted it to, this was just like a temporary haul road. We just need to get the thing operational ASAP. But the problem was we finished it. We finished we were using barges and stuff to haul material. And so we'd kind of finished that whole operation. We'd demobbed that and then had this ceremony for the first part of the project being finished. And the first thing the superintendent from the client did was just walk out the thing and then pace it out and then look at the drawing and then pace it out again. And it was like watching people's faces. It was like that meme where it's like, and at that moment he fucked up. And
so we're not talking a few millimeters out.
It was like half a meter out over 10 meters or something. But it was it was a huge amount if you viewed it it should have been 10 meters wide. And so it was a large problem. It was a big reputational damage for a very early part of a multi-year contract. And there was a warning issued to, I think there was a warning issued to the project engineer in charge of the scope. But yeah, it was a big lesson for me as a graduate engineer that what's on the drawings is what you're building, no matter what anyone says. And if you're deviating for that, there needs to because there was no onboarding about you should have an RFI, or you just start 3 months out of university, you're on a site building stuff.
Yeah. Did you ask the client representative why it took them that long to come and see it?
No. Surprisingly, as a 4 month into the industry graduate, I wasn't quite as sassy as some.
Carl's trying to push the responsibility back onto the client already.
Yeah. Carl's is looking for loopholes.
Oh, we both missed it, did we? Yeah.
But yeah, what's interesting is you do learn that lesson of what's the saying? When the shit hits the fan, everyone gets splattered. Because I'm sure internally the superintendent for the client also looked like an idiot because they had made all these statements internally. So yeah, I think everyone just looked like idiots as a result.
Yeah, there's no winners.
Righto, Carlos. What's your big? Where did you lose $1 million?
Well, it's funny because as a QS, you spend most of your time mopping up engineers' mistakes rather than creating your own. So I dug pretty deep.
There you go.
And I managed to recall one career mistake, which I thought I'd share.
I thought you were going to recall that one time you went on site.
Yeah. Oh. I went at least twice. No, so this was a package, it's like a multi-million-pound package that I was in charge of. It was a bit of an issue around the actual activity schedule for the works. And it was probably, I was fairly green out of uni and no real appreciation for site and how contractors and subcontractors have their own agenda and they know where they're going to make their money in the future. There were tons of these precast units to a very high spec. I was very probably generous and naive in agreeing the activity schedule where they were basically saying, can we get paid when we manufacture the units? And then we get paid when we install the units. So I'm thinking that sounds super fair. Why would you not, especially as they're big units, they cost a lot of money. So I got on board with the idea that they're front loading all the spend and waiting potentially quite a while to get any sort of payment for it. Pretty quickly, we were delayed and these guys are racking up units. And then suddenly the conversation is post-contract. Now we've got to store these units. We should have had unit to install within weeks, not months. So suddenly there's this massive bill to store the units and it's a facility outside of their precast yard. And then they say that it's not their responsibility if the units gets damaged because it's not within their control. And then the storage facility doesn't take any responsibility for the units within. So you've got this risk on what if things gets damaged because it's no longer permanently within their sort of care. You've got this big risk you've got this cost of storage, and we basically precast every unit before any of them went in because of delays to the other works. Definitely a naive screw up on my behalf to not actually play through that scenario on a scheme that was often delayed, and not really thinking through the real risk.
Were you getting paid by the client on the manufacturer as well? Were you like back to back in the payment structure, or you were also you were financing it?
Yeah, we were paid for effectively all costs that we could prove. So the second really annoying thing is, if you're being really particular, I'd have to go to the storage facility and count units to make sure that we're not overpaying. So you're then in a position of they said, okay, we've done 50 units. They've actually done 30. You pay for 50, and then you're in a real shit spot. So the time burden on doing a payment application involved trips out of London and all sorts of scenarios that you don't really be led into.
What would you have done? What would you have done differently?
Paid on installation only. Like, you could do something else, like you could pay for the materials that they're pulling in, so it's not tied to the finish of the unit or the damage to the unit. You could do something like that, but the original activity schedule was just pay on installation, which is the advice from the procurement team. It was just hard to get the subcontractors to sign up to it.
Wouldn't they submit a delay claim for push out anyway? Because obviously the precast yards have schedules, all that kind of stuff. If you're delaying them and they're casting, they'll submit a claim for that anyway, won't they?
Yeah. So you're going to get the cost in one form or another. They're either going to price it up front, or you're going to get a claim later. It's just harder to get the value back from the client because it's our own delays causing the additional cost. You're getting your cost covered, but you're not getting the target associated with it, putting yourself in a sticky situation.
The construction team would have loved it because they wouldn't have had to deal with casting schedules, and they could have got any piece of precast that they wanted or needed. So it would have been lovely.
Yeah,
you effectively de-risk that part of the project because the amount of times that the casting schedule starts dictating the construction schedule.
Yeah. You could argue a spin, which is we had plenty of units ready to go, so we could install them as quick as we like. But the bill was substantial, I should say, in terms of storage and additional lorry movements and all sorts of things to move them around.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You like Thomas said, you're probably going to get the cost anyway. I don't know. So the consequences for you were QS promoted.
I did get promoted during that package. Oh, no. The consequence was just when you're chatting to your commercial manager and they're just thinking, how much thought did you really put into that activity schedule? Is that feeling you're like, fuck, I know this is my fuck up, and now we're paying the cost. We got full recovery on the package and more from the client, not naming names. So it wasn't like the biggest fuck up in the end, but at the time it's a gutting feeling where you're like, this is a multi-million-pound package that I've really fucked up.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that you can viscerally remember, the feeling of the like sinking stomach feeling when you realize there's a problem, and you might own that problem. So you get the brain starts going into like overdrive solution mode while dealing with not the nicest feeling.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, lessons learned. That's it. And you probably documented that in the lessons learned process for the project. That was nicely.
Yeah, I got that Word doc, stuck it in SharePoint.
Yeah,
that no one ever reads. No one ever reads.
Yeah, I didn't just hide it.
Yeah. Nice. All right, Kel.
Yeah, so I reckon when I was a young engineer, this is my story when I'm maybe 10 years ago or something, I got a big ego check. And I reckon I'd wager that you guys would probably all do the same things that I did. So I'm keen to hear what you would do differently. So like I had just come from a job where I got to do lots of things. I was building a project in Asia, got to build a tower crane, self-perform FRP, sheet piles, all that sort of stuff. And I arrived back in Australia, and my scope that I got initially was go put some noise walls out. And I was on a golf course, thought, that's pretty simple, And I remember you just sort of just do that work while you get ramped up, and then you can plan for some of the more exciting stuff. And I'd be like, this is a cruisy gig. So I lined up the subby, I managed to squeeze them down, made sure that my role was going to be pretty easy. All I had to do was sort access and get concrete to them. So they dig the hole, they put the post in, they put the panels in. All I needed to do was deliver them concrete once a day. I was like, beautiful, cruisy, be a good gig. And so first week, I detailed out the forecast. I was going to make a shitload of money. I was going to, it's going to be an easy cost code to manage. And so the first week, I think they mobilized the site one day. And then 2 out of the remaining 4 days, I couldn't get concrete to them. The week before, it had just rained and the golf course was like boggy and the edges would get bogged. And then we had IC on site. And so like if it was bogged for too long, I had to bail the concrete. I had to ditch it. So I just had to dump the concrete because I couldn't go on the noise wall because it sat in the edgy too long. Because didn't need traffic plus getting bogged.
Yeah.
Where do you dump concrete?
Yeah, you just have to just get rid of it because you can't place it beyond a certain time limit.
Okay.
So I just had to just get rid of it, because the IC was pretty intense on that then. So the second week it wasn't much better, right? It had rained again over the weekend. I just go out there and they all got bogged. I couldn't bloody get concrete out to these noise walls out the back of the golf course. So, I was pretty eager, young engineer, and I started horse trading with the tunneling team that had just got some brand new, shiny, four-wheel drive Aggies that had arrived. And also, I pulled some favors in with the earthwork subby that was on site, and I stacked some precast jersey barriers along the side, dug out a box out for like a ramp down and a ramp up, and I rolled in, built in some layers, and I built like a ramp and a transfer station to take from the wholesome Aggie into the four-wheel drive Aggie. And then the four-wheel drive Aggie just, booked it down through the golf course and was managed to deliver the concrete. So like, I was feeling like pretty shit hot. Like, I think I did a good job. And then I think I did that for about 2 weeks. And like, we're getting the banging in the noise wall every day. We're not missing a day of concrete. And then the temporary works manager walks out onto site and goes, "Oh, where's your temporary works design brief for that ramp that you've built?" And I was going, "What do you mean? What temporary works design brief?" And so, "You haven't done a risk assessment on it." And they'd be like, "Oh, this has worked pretty well for the last 2 weeks." And they made me pull the whole thing down, rip it all down. And I had to go back to the way I was doing it before. And, maybe once a week, Aggies get bogged and I couldn't deliver the concrete out there. So yeah, it was a big ego check, but I'd probably still build the ramp again, I think.
What's an Aggie?
Oh yeah, so we do a quick translation. An Aggie's a concrete lorry.
Fine.
What would you do differently? Like,
I don't know.
Do the temporary works from the start.
I would ask ChatGPT, what should I do next? Sorry.
This was 10 years ago, Carl, so you don't have that option. One thing that's interesting, Kel, is like your example and maybe like Carlos's as well. There's kind of this like classification of a problem that was always going to be a problem. It's just really about who might have been responsible for solving the problem. The devil's always in the detail, isn't it? That's like the learning on any construction project that you kind of learn over and over again. Like, oh yeah, getting these guys concrete, that'll be super easy. Turns out it's a nightmare. And I feel like so many of the clients, we had this on Crossrail where there were certain things that were being issued to us. I worked on a project where the client was issuing concrete as well, and so many of the issues were on. Yeah, you just create another interface that becomes one to manage. So yeah, I'm avoiding your question of what I would have done differently.
No, you would have done the temporary works design brief from the start. You're right. Everyone would have planned every minute detail out.
Yeah. That's what the LinkedIn influencer would say.
But did you have a design that you like kind of copied, or did you just
just
full hand snap it in? So you couldn't even be like, "Oh no, I did it in these layers with this kind of grade of material."
Well, a jersey barrier is it's not that high, and you'd cut a ramp into it, and we had been working for 2 weeks. Like, clearly it was
million sound. Yeah.
That was the design life. What, a month?
Yeah.
I think there's like probably a learning, well, at least something I would take from previous projects in relation to what you said, Cal. If I was thinking about the constructing of the scope of who would do something, there's probably this kind of like, I hate to use the word risk assessment, but this kind of like what if exercise that have been worth doing of like, what if I can't get the concrete to them, or what if, like, because the issue that I had on a project was client issuing concrete, and the concrete started going off in the Aggies an hour and a half before it was supposed to, while it was on a barge in the middle of the ocean. You end up with this giant argument. We end up having to demolish a structure in the ocean as a result of it. If I was thinking about my like execution strategy and who would own what scope, I'd be definitely bringing a group of people from the project in the room and going, what could go wrong with this? Because it's the things you don't think of that burn you, right?
That happens, right, Jace? But it tends to be a lot more safety and environmental focused. Every activity method statement or work pack or swims has to have a risk assessment where the team would do that. But it quite often is very safety and environmental focused, rightly so. But sometimes things that end up costing you lots of money aren't discussed in that forum, which sometimes could be the really important things.
Do you think that that's like a risk associated with the kind of responsibility held by, say, engineers in Australia, where you often kind of you're the architect of your kind of methodology for your scope, you're the owner of the budget, so you're kind of, I don't know, marking your own homework. You can convince yourself it's going to work?
Yeah, I think so. And partly, most engineers have like a very finite amount of time, and sometimes it's the squeaky wheel that will get the grease. Like if they've got the safety managers prodding them for like their third revision on the swims or the risk assessment, then they'll probably just have to do that, as opposed to someone telling them that maybe you should do more further risk assessments because maybe you've got a risk you're going to blow this cost code out or something.
Because like I'd imagine in, say, the UK, both Thomas and Carlos's QSs would have been, I don't know, they wouldn't know how, I don't know, maybe they would have picked up the risk or not, but there would have been a second person in the conversation with that lens, I guess, coming to the fore. Or maybe, depending on the size of the project, maybe it's the procurement person rather than the QS as well.
Yeah, and those sort of conversations, you're in this weird spot where even if you think you're like on the money with an idea or a thought or a risk that hasn't been discussed, you always feel like you're going to say it and the engineers be like, you have no idea what you're talking about, and then they move on. So there's this balance of like being helpful and probably having like out of meeting conversations with someone to be like, I don't know if this is a dumb thing to think about, but like this was top of mind, rather than sort of trying to lead the discussion, because the reality is the QSs have never been there and done it and poured concrete and whatever it is that you're planning on site.
I was going to say, I don't think many of the QSs I have met and worked with probably would have picked up in the same way that, Kelvin didn't pick up that, hey, there's going to be an issue here with bogged AGIs. That methodology has obviously been signed off by a fair few people. I'm assuming an area manager probably had to sign off it as well. And no one's picked up that, hey, there's an issue here.
I just hate to be in the room and be like, what's a bogged AGI? And I get out.
I think there's probably something that I would have learning I'd take forward around like the culture and vibe on a project, because I remember myself being in some like methodology reviews for a method I've like created and constructed I'm the owner of. And if you're and oftentimes you'd feel like, at least the project I'm thinking of, it was a very high pressure, maybe a little bit finger pointing culture, and you feel motivated to defend your position. Like I probably would have, if I was Kelvin, I would have argued why my methodology was right, rather than be maybe open to exploring the risk and what I would do in that case of the risk. So it's amazing how many things come back to culture.
Well, like it's in my defense, like, you got a subby on site that needs concrete every day, like how you got to get it to them, and there's like a golf course in between, and it rains. Like, how is he going to get over there? We're going to bring out a concrete pump every day and run a concrete pump just on the off chance they get bogged.
But then the other thing is, if you're not going to get paid for the ramp, and you could have claimed for the weather potentially, so you're suddenly in this horrible situation where you're just burning cash with no recovery. So it's like being proactive is sometimes the worst thing to do if you haven't had like some sort of construction or whatever.
Cam's head is in his hands listening to the QS, like trying to say that being proactive.
Honestly,
it's true though, isn't it? It's true.
I also think, Carlos, in Oz, you don't tend to get wet weather allowance days. Like that's normally held by the contractor.
If it's a wet weather day in Oz, it must be a 1 in 10 year event, right? So.
No, but like I think if I was to push back, if I was to take the other side of you, Kelvin, I'd be like, because you made the argument, like, what are the chances it was going to rain and they'd get be bogged or whatever? Like, if you were trying to deliver concrete over a period of like a month, 2 months, 3 months, I think if you did the risk assessment of like what's the likelihood it rains, it'd be pretty high.
Like, Sydney's raining all the time.
Yeah.
You saying he should have planned to do it in the first place?
Yeah, but like oftentimes especially in Australia, you are the architect of your own process and owning the commercials, and you're trying to make money and build a method. And yeah, sometimes you can think of potential things that would go wrong and you go, God, that's never going to happen. And sometimes the person asking that, it doesn't help if you're in a review where they're like, what happens if it rains? And then the next question is like, what happens if aliens arrive? Like they can come up with like crazy risks as well as like legitimate ones.
Yeah.
I think Cam's going to build the ramp. No one else.
100%. I want to build the ramp, but I want to try to follow
Yeah,
some kind of design. I can bullshit my way through it in the back. But I'll definitely be proactive, Carlos. I can't believe you even said that. Like, that is outrageous.
No one likes a proactive engineer.
Oh, Jesus.
Carlos is not needed on a construction site.
That's next time's conversation, right?
Yeah, next topic. Do we need proactive? I think literally the next topic is, do we need QSs? I think that is
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
next
I'm looking
week's-
forward to it. Is there still
Carlos
one on
the
the 4
post
on
box.
1? Yeah, I'll bring it on, lads. Right. I think we have hit time. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Really enjoyed that. And thank you very much, everyone, for tuning into today's show. If you did enjoy the episode, please do think about liking the video or following us on your chosen podcast platform. We really appreciate your support, and we'll catch you all next week. Just realized it's not necessarily next week.